and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is Matt. Welcome back, Matt.
Hello, how are you doing? Glad to be back.
Yeah, happy you're back. We've got a variety of news today. We've got gaming, we've got some Saturn news as well, some DC news. But first, if this is your very first episode of the show, the way we format it is we go through this week's news, and then we end it with the Brocat Block, which is what Matt and I have been up to since you last heard us, the more personal side of the show where you get to know us a little bit better. So let's jump right in and explore sector number 569. So there's a new study by Your Dictionary's Word Finder, which revealed that Gen Z is the dominant anime generation, with 69% of respondents saying they watch anime. Millennials follow behind at 57%, Gen X at 40%, and even baby boomers showing surprising interest at 23%. The study also shows that American anime fans prefer subtitles, which are called subs, over dubbed versions of popular shows. This was a smaller study. It only ended up polling, I believe, about 1,000 people, but I do believe it because I know that in the last couple years that I worked at the shop, manga was spiking, and it was definitely teenagers, people that would normally be buying comic books, Spider-Man, all that stuff at that age, were instead buying manga books.
I totally buy this. That you can extrapolate that onto a larger scale. Mangas, like with anything, there's wax and wane periods, but they made their first inroads, like that I can remember, like serious pushes into bookstores and like Barnes & Noble's Border when that was a thing back in the early 2000s. So it taking root with Gen X is accurate, but it seems like it's gained. They've been going through another surge the last few years, not only with more manga coming over here, but a lot more anime adaptations coming across. So I'd find all this totally believable. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers were higher.
I've said it a few times on the show where I do think that anime, manga, that's probably going to be the next big thing as far as like action movies or blockbusters. I know that adaptations are kind of frowned upon these days, but they've been getting better. There's been more hits. There's been stuff that has been faithfully adapted, and there's been stuff that's been changed that has still been good, like Speed Racer, for example. But I do think that as they continue to grow and as they become the future consumers that are going to be the ones that start having families and all of that, that they probably will start focusing on not just adaptations, but on bringing more anime films that are straight from Japan, like Demon Slayer or the latest Dragon Ball Supers, throwing them up on the big screen and seeing how much a wide release truly brings in. Are there any anime that you had growing up that you watched? Is it something that ever caught you or something that you've gotten more into as you've gotten older?
Well, when I was a kid, it was starting to become practice where you would have U.S. companies basically buy or license anime that they would, basically rewrite the script to. They would either combine like unrelated series or they would rewrite the script to kind of change the story. So it was technically a new thing, kind of like, how Mighty Morphin Power Rangers wasn't a thing in Japan. It was like a string of like several like very similar type shows that they just kind of like rewrote and remarketed as a continuing series until it became its own continuing series.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, that was Robotech. You had Robotech Southern Cross, and then I can't remember the last one, but it was originally 3 separate series called Macross.
Oh yeah, Macross.
Southern Cross, and then Genesis Climber Mosquito, which were completely unrelated. But they bought U.S. company bought the rights for them in the U.S., rewrote the entire script, and loosely connected them, and it became one saga. And I ate that shit up when I was a kid. The original Voltron was a port over from anime that just rewrote the script and eventually became its own thing.
Transformers 2, wasn't it? Or was that just made in Japan and then produced here.
Made in Japan, produced here, because
Gotcha.
they just wanted to sell toys, but they wanted to make commercials, and most cartoons in the 80s were advertising us to sell toys. Then I want to say in the early 2000s, Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, so good.
and Trigun. I was really upset that I was really let down by the Netflix adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. Like, I really wanted that to succeed, and there was just something off about it. But I really wanted more of that. Yeah, and like I said, Trigun. Like, I want to see the new Trigun. I'll probably wait until that's done before I see it. I tried getting into Dragon Ball, just never took root with me. I've seen a bunch of episodes of My Hero Academia, and that's fun, but I don't really keep up with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got the same issue, and I like a lot of the same stuff that you were mentioning, especially Cowboy Bebop. That's probably my favorite anime, even though I've seen all of Dragon Ball Super, and I'm caught up on it. I can say that Cowboy Bebop, to me, is the best produced of the things that I've watched. And I just kind of want more of that. I've been looking for more of that, especially as I try to go back. Eventually, I'll get a Crunchyroll subscription and try to catch some Gundam series. But I found that shows like My Hero Academia or some of the current stuff, like actually Demon Slayer, I gave another shot and it definitely grew on me on the latest season. But a lot of the stuff that is popular now, which I'll give it a shot, it's simply not aimed for me. I think I just grew out of that age where, it's a high school kid that is not the best at the thing, but then they persevere and they make friends with the person that they saw as their rival. And it's just kind of the same type of trope. And I understand how that's appealing to a younger viewer, or in this case, someone that's in Gen Z. But to me, I'm looking for a little bit more out of these cartoons. So that's definitely why I would fall under that 57% millennial thing, where I would say I'm a casual anime viewer, and when I do watch it, I'm kind of looking for something a little heavier.
I do hope they eventually get they've been trying to get a live action adaptation of Akira Robotech going for, like, I want to say like 10, 15 years now. They keep changing producers, changing hands, and I'm hoping that we'll eventually get a good live action adaptation of both of those properties.
Isn't Waida Taikiti right now attached to the live action Akira?
Oh God, I don't know. I thought last time I heard him, he was still working on a Star Wars movie, but
right,
he's certainly intriguing for Akira. But I hope he doesn't bring like the comedic aspect to it. Like, that's a pretty serious, pretty heavy, anime. I hope they are faithful to the manga and the anime of that.
So here I have that director Taika was named as the director for the adaptation, but they put the project on indefinite hold just prior to filming, as he chose to first direct Love and Thunder. And so who knows? He might return for that, or they might put him on Lobo as the next big rumored thing, which is we'll probably get a comedic Lobo film out of him. Here we have some video game news coming out of the Summer of Games event, and there wasn't anything massive, although there were two pretty big news stories on my end, and I know some gamers might find some of the trailers and things like Starfield, which does look incredible. But the ones that caught my eye was first from Microsoft, the Xbox Series S. It got a 1 terabyte upgrade in carbon black. So this gives gamers more storage and a sleek design. So it's got the same performance as the Series S, so next gen performance, and it goes up to 120 frames per second, fully compatible with current Series S and Series X accessories. And you can use Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription with it, which is the idea, because there's no disk drive behind the Series S. And pre-orders currently start at $349.99. Global launch is set for September 1st. The reason I put this on here is last week, Maceo and he was predicting pretty hard on some of these things, and he got it accurate. He's like, what if we'll probably get is an upgrade on storage, especially now that the storage prices have gone down, now that there is more competition. And he was absolutely correct with this Series S upgrade. This is what I was waiting for, because I almost pulled the trigger on the Series S a few times over the last couple of months. And now with the 1 terabyte upgrade, that's great news for me. I'm not getting it on September 1st because right around the corner are the holidays. And I bet you there will be bundles or discounts during the holiday seasons for this 1 terabyte upgrade.
Wait for that Prime Day.
Oh, that too? Yeah, when is that this year?
I mean, they usually do it twice a year, and you think there's like a summer one and then one in October.
All right, I'll check the October one. And
October
I
and
guess
November. Yeah, like a Black Friday thing too.
okay, good. So it'll be right after the launch of it. That might be a good time to check then. Absolutely. See what they throw in. The other big announcement from it is from Sega, who announced Sonic Superstars. It is a new 2D Sonic game with a classic vibe, bringing nostalgia to all of us who grew up on the Sega Genesis. Unlike the previous entries, again, this is an all-new game from Sonic Team, has new levels and new content. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy will be playable in 4-player co-op. And again, this is an original 2D experience. It's been over 10 years now since we've had that, since Sonic 4 released, which wasn't received the greatest. It was kind of a rocky launch. Since then, they've re-released the old games and collections, but this is pretty big. This is a newly designed game, and this is, I think, what a lot of Sonic fans have been asking for.
It's wild to think it's been 10 years since the last new Sonic game.
Well, Sonic Frontiers came out last year, but that was a 3D experience.
Oh, I mean, the 2D, I mean.
Yeah, like a whole new one. It's kind of funny because the Sonic fan base, it's made up of very much like Star Wars or anything else that's had a long shelf life. It's made up of so many generations of gamers that there's the ones that grew up on the Sonic Adventure series, so they like the 3D games. They're the ones buying Frontier and everything. There's the ones like me who grew up on the Genesis one, so I prefer the 2D experience. And then there's the ones that are like the latest ones, and right now it's a mix of both. They're getting some 2D and they're getting some 3D. So I think they're trying to satisfy all generations of Sonic, fully knowing that I think even kids will probably get something like Superstars, even though it's not a 3D experience. Moving on to some DC news, Gotham Knights has been canceled after a single season on the CW, marking another blow for the network. And this brings about significant changes following its acquisition by Nexstar Media Group. So this show joins a list of other canceled CW dramas, including Walker Independence, The Winchesters, Kung Fu Reboot, and Two Sentence Horror Stories. CW's president, Brad Schwartz, expressed appreciation for the shows, but cited budget considerations as a factor in the decision. In the same round, Superman and Lois got renewed for a 4th season, but on a shorter budget. So, Matt, are Gotham Knights or Superman and Lois shows that you've been following?
Gotham Knights, I haven't been following at all. They're really, any of the descriptions, any of the story synopsis behind it, like none of it sounded appealing to me. Nothing really grabbed me about it. And it just looked like as ground level as you could get. I'm like, it's the son of Batman, but it's not Damian. There's nothing, no one really in there that's recognizable. And it just didn't, there wasn't anything appealing about it to me. I never saw anything that said like, oh, I'll give it, just even like watching the pilot. I've never felt that about anything Batman related. As far as like Superman and Lois, like I'm very happy that's coming back. I love that show. I've been watching that since the beginning, but I usually wait for a few episodes to build up. Tyler Hoechlin's a great Superman. Elizabeth Tulloch's a great Lois Lane. I love the story with him as a dad, with teenage kids, and that they let them divorce it from the Arrowverse. Like he played a version of Superman in the Arrowverse, but they made it, they kind of danced around it for a while, but they later admitted that like it's a separate universe. It's not the same one, just happens to look like that universe of Superman. And I've really enjoyed it. Like it's been a very strong show. Like they've only been doing 13 episode seasons. So yeah, it keeps it fairly tight. You get to see alternate versions of characters that that came out a little bit different. They're allowed to like play with remix things in ways that are kind of surprising and unexpected. And this season has been especially hard, where I don't know how much, it's not really a spoiler, but like the thrust of Lois's storyline this season is that she's thought she was pregnant in the season opener, and she found out that she actually has breast cancer. And so they've been dealing with that in a very honest and, open way, how Lois, has been dealing with, being treated with cancer, and how Superman is basically powerless to do anything about that. It's something he can't fight. And it's just been, like kind of gut wrenching. Like my wife's, been watching she would watch an occasional episode with me, like the first couple of seasons. It wasn't her thing. But this season, like I've been actively trying to not let her, not watch it and warning her not to watch any of it because her mother, struggled with breast cancer until she passed away, 6 years ago. So she would be a complete wreck because it's that. I've had other family members with cancer and have died of cancer. So it's been it's like a very emotional season to watch. I think it's good that it's coming back, but I'm not excited about 10 episode season on a slash budget. That means some characters are going to get, written off or reduced roles, or, are we going to have 2 or 3 episodes with a powerless Superman so they can save on special effects?
Yep.
Seems like.
That's exactly, yeah. Or they'll do that storyline where he walks the earth or whatever that was in the night. Was it 2000s?
Yeah, I gotta hope
Superman
not,
grounded.
But he still had powers. He just walked the earth. I really wish they would let it go to Max and let it do its thing there. I know when James Gunn was asked about it a few months ago, he felt like they had more time, they had a couple more seasons left that he wanted to give that show, or that he felt they had in that show. And all Nextstar's got no, I'm surprised that they renewed it because they can't rebroadcast the first 2 seasons. They're all on Max.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things where this will probably be they're probably going to wrap it up with this 4th season, if I had to guess, right? If it's on a reduced budget, you think the showrunners got told, hey, try to wrap up this season, or don't leave it on a cliffhanger because we don't know if you'll even have a reduced budget for a season 5.
I'm glad that they are getting that, because everything that I've read about how the season is supposed to end is it's supposed to end on a cliffhanger. So, if they're coming back for a 4th season, especially with a new Superman movie being produced, I feel like it's probably going to be they're going to get the opportunity to wrap up their story.
Yeah, neither of these shows were ones that I watched, and Gotham Knights especially. I had the same thing with you where I'm like, if I wanted something like this, I already have Titans if I wanted to jump into that, which, I only saw the first season of. So even then, I'm like, this is too similar to that. And I get that they're fully different characters, but I don't know. I felt like anyone that watches Titans isn't also going to watch Gotham Knights. And obviously, I'm assuming the ratings weren't there, or the stream numbers weren't out there for this show. So that's kind of how it's going to go, especially with Nextstar, and then whatever direction they want to head into with DC. I know that Gunn has famously said that he wants the shows to be in the same universe as the movies, so they may try to implement a lot of that together. Like, we're going to cut some of these shows, if they're paying for any of these, and do their own spin-offs or whatever he wants to do to make sure that it all fits into that universe. And here's something that I had seen on Twitter. It had been sent over to me by a few people, and you definitely mentioned it for the show notes, is that Kevin Smith revealed that he has seen the Schumacher cut of Batman Forever and plans on reviewing it. So I had someone ask me, how is there a Schumacher cut with Schumacher gone? He has passed away. But, I explained that they did something similar with the Donner cut with Superman 2. Even then, they didn't have fully completed scenes to put that together, but I believe they did it to the best of their ability, or to the best of the original script, and went from there. And I'm guessing that they're doing the same with the Schumacher cut. Do you think this is a sign that they're going to release it in the next couple of years?
I think they're probably let him watch it to kind of build interest, to just release it on maybe Max or something like that. I mean, there's been rumors of a Schumacher cut since before he passed away. He had talked about that he had a different cut. He had a different cut of that movie. I think they cut half an hour out of that movie, just cut half an hour out of BVS. And I liked Batman Forever when it came out. I thought it was a nice change of pace from Batman Returns, which I had some issues with. The Batman Forever was kind of I equate it to almost an update, kind of like a blend between Burton and an update of the 60s show. It's not something I want to see them continue, but it was a nice change of pace for one movie. I didn't want to see them continue. Unfortunately, Joel Schumacher, who was a great director, is by the fan community is largely remembered for how terrible Batman and Robin was. but I would be very interested to see what what his cut was, and I'll be very interested to see what Kevin Smith says about it, because he's a big Batman fan, and I think he'll be honest in his appraisal of it. But I hope they at least release it to streaming, because I want to see it.
Yeah, he'll for sure like it. Like, if you ever want to gauge interest with anyone and you want positive buzz, show it to Kevin Smith, because that guy seems to like everything. He has nothing negative to say about anything. And that's one of those examples where even back then there was studio meddling. Over the years, even, he was even a joke in Batman the Animated Series. There was a character in season 4 called Joel. It's one of the kids where they're telling the different stories of Batman. And they made Joel Schumacher that kid, and they made fun of him, like, even there.
Yep. Legends of the Dark Knight. That was the
that's right. That's the one. He mentions that the Batmobile drives up walls. But
Yep.
In the years since, we found out that the studio had a lot of pull with Batman and Robin, where they told them, like, we need to sell Happy Meals, we need to sell toys, make sure that each of the characters has a vehicle, make sure that this is in there, and make sure that that's in there. By the end of it, it wasn't his film, especially with Batman and Robin. Batman Forever and you can feel the difference between the two movies. Batman Forever feels a lot more grounded. It feels like it fits more into even the Burton universe, even though it's its own thing. If, the gothic Gotham City looks more like it would sort of fit into the Burton universe. And I think since learning all of that, at least I know the general fandom still kind of points and laughs, but kind of having gone through the experience now of several films, going through a studio cut, Suicide Squad, BVS, the Snyder Cut, all of that, at least I can kind of look sympathetically back on Batman Forever and even Batman and Robin and think, this is a result of the studio. And I too enjoyed Batman Forever, but it's good to know that there is a better cut out there. And I believe there is, because we've seen some of that footage online already, some of those deleted scenes that were in some of these DVD releases. And there are some deeper meanings to what Bruce went through, his trauma as a child, which we saw a lot of in Batman Forever, but there was more of it in the Schumacher cut.
Even the screenwriter, Akiva Goldsman, he's the one who also kind of was, I think, has kind of spearheaded this and trying to bring attention to it, because he has talked about this alternate cut for a while. So I hope it sees the light of day for the general audience.
Definitely agree. And we have some future news also on DC Studios, as in an interview on the Inside of You podcast. DC Studios co-CEO James Gunn said he believes there are too many superhero movies. He criticized the repetitive nature and generic tone of many superhero films, calling for a wider range of genres and more emotional depth. He empathized that, quote, superhero fatigue, end quote, is actually a result of repetition and lack of innovation. And I of course, found this ironic, because after the first Guardians released, every movie had to be like Guardians. And every movie, I think, ramped up its humor, including the Marvel Universe. And now we're getting the DC Universe, which all the clips I've seen from The Flash is another film that could very much fit into the MCU. It could be something that was written by someone who mainly does a lot of comedy. So I just found that kind of funny that he himself propelled a lot of that due to the success of that first Guardians.
Well, it's funny. So I listened to that that podcast, because I wanted to see what he was saying too. And he doesn't give many at length interviews. It's just a lot of like what people report he says on Twitter. And he was saying not just comic book movies. He was talking in general as far as like the spectacle films, period. Like, there's not a whole lot of mid-level budget movies. It's just there's a kind of like a malaise, like everyone's kind of doing the same thing. And just like in in comic books, every time there's someone with a kind of a different style, or that grabs a lot of eyeballs, sells a lot of t-shirts or toys, or gets butts in the seats, Marvel would pivot or have a house style for like their X-Men books. Like Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, they set a style, and then they wanted everyone else that were doing books in the X-Men universe to all draw like them. The same thing with like the Avengers books, or like when again with the X-Men, when Joe Madureira came along, everyone had to draw in a manga style, or as some friends that I went to school would call it a mangarific style. Marvel had a particular style, and then like the movies, and then James Gunn was allowed to do something a little bit different stylistically, add more color and more weirdness, and definitely more humor than there had been other movies. And then all of a sudden, like that was so successful, he changed the dynamic of Marvel movies. Now the other movies kind of like picked up on that, for good or ill. But like if you still take the Guardians movies out of the Marvel universe, they still are stylistically different, and they play as a different genre than like the other movies. I think what he's talking about is Kevin Feige has talked about like Captain America, the Winter Soldier was more of was inspired by spy thrillers or political thrillers, and there's not really a lot of risks that are being allowed, and they're basically playing to what the certain demographics. There's a formula on there that says we need to have so many laughs per minute. Like, I get it. And not just but comic book movies. I would say that like I'm looking for a different type of blockbuster too that's not doing the same thing. And I still have to see Top Gun too, because it sounds like it's that different one. I'm really looking forward to like the next Mission Impossible movie. So I'm looking, I love that series too. So I'm looking forward to like seeing, him bring that change that he brought to, the Marvel movies, to see what he does with it, what he can do with DC.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're on different ends of the spectrum here. I think we're going to get more of the same personally, which I know I don't like. And so I know these aren't for me, and that's fine. I don't have to vote with I'm voting with my dollar. I'm not going to pay to see those. But him bringing up the mid-level budget type of film, it's kind of interesting where it goes back to that discussion of people are definitely willing to go back to theaters, right? We've seen hits. The Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse just did really well. Transformers just did really well. Fast 10 did incredible also. So people want to go, and they're willing to go to the theater, but they don't want to see movies like Air, something that's mid-budget in that case. And it's, for whatever reason, it seems like it's only event films or sequels or things tied into franchises that the general public is willing to see. I think the days, unfortunately, are done of where you can have a different wide range of films and see which ones are the smaller hits or bigger hits, in that case. Like, I don't think a movie like, Pretty Woman would be a huge hit in 2023. It wouldn't have that same shot. And it's just because the landscape of movie theaters is so different now. The mentality of people, the ease of access to entertainment is much greater now, that I think that the threshold of, you really have to go see this on day one. I'm not going to wait for a streamer or a DVD. Like, that threshold, that level is much higher today than it was, even pre-pandemic.
Well, I mean, the only way to kind of like course correct that is really you've got to get, and it's never going to happen, but you've got to get streamers and studios to get on board with waiting 6 months to a year before that, like once the theatrical run is done, to sell that to put that on a streamer. I mean, when I was a kid, like, E.T., Top Gun, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, it was not uncommon when I was, a very young child, that blockbuster movies, it could come out like, say like it came out this weekend. It would not be unusual for it to still be in the theaters a year from now. And then when it finally finishes its run, it would be only available for rental for like maybe a year, and then finally 2 years after the movie came out, then you could buy it to own it, or you could buy a used copy from a rental store. And then DVD came along, and that window got shorter, and then streaming came along, and now the window's even shorter. Then the pandemic came along, and now that window got shortened to it's coming out the same day it's in the theaters. And while no one was going to the theaters, not everyone's able to go back to the theaters. That window is 45 days now. 45 days. There's no incentive for people to go to to a movie for anything other than a blockbuster if they know it's good. Even a lot of blockbusters, if they know they're going to be able to see it in a month and a half.
Yeah, I brought this up before where my trainer at work, she was like, the Super Mario Brothers movie came out like within a week or two of the theatrical launch on Vudu. You can get it digitally for $30. You can purchase it, and they call it like advanced streaming or whatever. own it for $30. And she was like, I just did that because to take my niece and nephew to the theater would end up being over $30 anyway. So I'm like, let me just buy it. We own it now and they could see it at home and they've already seen it twice. And she didn't have that choice, she would have had to take them to the theaters. And Mario did great, but I'm just saying that many movies are probably losing out on those ticket sales because of, like you mentioned, that window.
Mm-hmm.
And since you did hear this podcast that he was on, you can probably touch on this next one, as on that same show, Gunn seemed to have complained about one of the aspects of his job that he finds difficult, which is saying no to people. In an interview on that same podcast by Michael Rosenbaum, he talked about having to reject projects and ideas. And I hear that he portrayed himself as a bit of a victim of his own power. He talked about turning down aspiring creators. And this is one of those things that if you're an executive at a studio, you got to make these tough decisions. So some people viewed this as self-centered. They said that he focused on his own discomfort, which showed a lack of empathy rather than being the leader in the industry. So since you heard the show, but I don't know if you heard this part of the interview, but
I listened to the entire thing.
What can you tell us about this?
The power went out at my place. My wife and I went down to the pool while we couldn't work, and I just sat in the pool and listened to the whole hour and a half podcast of talk. And it was, I would say, if you're not a fan of James Gunn, you're gonna look for that's a very easy characterization to make. I did not agree. I don't agree with that characterization of his comments. In fact, I find I came out of that, kind of identifying more. I mean, I don't have the same experience he does, but there were certain things about his life that he was talking about leading up to this that I'm like, yeah, I see that point of view. And, I get people aren't a fan of James Gunn, but after listening to him for an hour and a half, like I found not him so much, it was kind of like a mild lament. It wasn't so much a self-centered thing. Like he's someone who, is someone I can something I can identify with, that when he was young, he wanted to tell stories and he wanted to be rich and famous. Like, well, now that he's rich and famous, when the whole like getting fired off after Guardians 2, he's like his career was over, it was done, and okay, now maybe I don't want to be like that, and I don't want that, since y'all basically lost it in a day. And he looked over at his future wife, and he's like, you know what, everything's going to be okay. And he's kind of like talking about, just like, it's a weird problem to have where, he was the outsider at Marvel. Like he hadn't directed anything, of note or, huge, other than like cult, he had a couple cult classics or cult hits that, very few people have seen, but he hadn't directed anything big. And we went and directed something that obviously at this point has catapulted him into being, the CEO of, DC. So it's kind of he realizes and recognizes the reality of having to say no. It was in response to a question where someone had submitted asking him, like, if what's the hardest no you've had to make or tell someone, or the easiest, like, do you ever feel good about saying no? And he's like, I feel there are some times where it's very easy to say no, but like it's now, I've got all this responsibility, I've got all these projects, and like I have to say no to some of these people. It's just the reality of it. And so it was more of him acknowledging the reality of it, and then I think whining about it or lamenting it. It's just he's just more commenting on the position that he never expected to be in 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, kind of viewing a summary of what he said, it's one of those things that I don't know, if I were him, I wouldn't even talk about being the head of the studio and having to make those decisions. As a leader, it's, as a proposed leader, it's like, well, I took this gig, I'm going to PR the hell out of this, especially, with all the detractors, including myself, that will easily pick away at this, and spin it as a negative. And if did he talk at all about, because pre him getting the head of the studio, he talked about how he would say yes to the Ayer cut, for example. And did he at all mention that cut? Because it seems like, Ayer has been sucking his dick for the last year, and there hasn't been anything that came out of it. And did he touch on that at all?
Michael Rosenbaum didn't really bring those up. So like they talked about, he brought up projects that, you know, that James Gunn himself has been like attached to. I've talked about his career and then like some of the difficulties he's had or some of the decisions he's had to make. But they didn't really mention anything about the Snyder Cut. They didn't mention anything about Henry Cavill. They didn't mention anything about, they even only like barely mentioned anything about the Flash movie that comes out. We're recording this the day before Flash comes out, so like he barely mentioned that because it wasn't really that kind of a conversation. He wasn't the interviewer, so if Michael Rosenbaum wasn't going to lead him there, they weren't gonna, he wasn't really going to talk about it. He was just following his lead. And I'm sure that Michael Rosenbaum probably chose not to bring that up because they've been friends for years.
There's probably some topics too that they're told ahead of time by a publicist, hey, don't touch on these things.
I'm sure, because they even, like you mentioned at the end of like after Gunn was off, that like the publicist it'd be great if you sent this to us to listen to before you actually release it, and they didn't have him change anything, so they probably told him ahead of time, don't bring up these certain things, and he stuck with that. And this was like the only like wide reaching like interview that Gunn says like he has got time. You won't see him doing like another hour and a half long podcast interview for probably until the Superman comes out. Like if he does anything long form like that, like he says, his schedule is too full at this right now to do. He only did it because Rosenbaum's is a longtime friend of his.
Well, we've got one last bit of Gunn news, as it does involve Superman Legacy. And this did bring up a back and forth on Twitter with his fan base, his own fan base there, as he did evade commitment to the iconic Superman trunks, and that left real DC fans disappointed. So he had a vague response on Twitter to a fan's question, suggests that the inclusion of the trunks is still undecided. He said that there's concept art being created for both options. So this brought up concerns about, with some Superman fans, and I'm anti-trunks, right? I think you can do the Superman without the trunks. But the Superman fans that you see criticize Man of Steel, Zack Snyder's Justice League, all these other films that try to do something beyond, Superman, to try to bring him into a different light. People complained about how they can't relate to Superman after Superman Returns. And then, we got Man of Steel and BVS and everything. And he really humanized the character a lot. So that fan base that didn't like those films are saying that they need the iconic look of the trunks outside. They want the rich history of Superman represented in Legacy. They consider it fidelity to the character itself. So as an outsider, I found it funny that his own fan base is already kind of like, you better have the fucking trunks in there.
So let's just put this out there right now. Trunks are not a character trait. They are not a personality trait. They are a design choice. They were a design choice born out of the 1930s, 1940s, circus performers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you tell that to these people.
Also from from printing technology at the time, like it was to break up the color of the costume. As printing technology got better, everyone got rid of their trunks. Like Superman was like the last one that had just like, the traditional trunks until the New 52. And then there was the debate of, when like Zack Snyder was doing Man of Steel, the first still they released with him, like kind of like hunched over that bank vault behind him, like that first fight, like that they released in there. I personally like took that photo and because it was desaturated, I ran it through Photoshop and I tried to update the saturation, looking for any hint of the trunks, because there had been rumors then that people were up in arms, like, you gotta have the trunks, right. And to me, when I pumped up the saturation, it looked like there was a hint of red down there, but again, it wasn't enough to tell. And did anyone who I think was complaining about the trunks, like I don't know, like, it can look good, it can look bad. It looked good in Superman Returns with Brandon Routh. they also made it look good without the trunks in Man of Steel. They made it look good on his suit in Superman and Lois. Like, it's just more of a, like, is there something to break up that midsection so it's just not like all one skin tight bodysuit? Personally, if they can come up with a good design with the trunks, I would love the trunks just because it's a traditional design. It seems like it would be something that would be in line with Gunn's comments of like Superman's kind of like a softie, a big old galoot, and like I could see a big old galoot putting on some silly little trunks.
He's gonna have the trunks, man. I'm telling you, it's gonna happen.
I don't care. Like, and right now he doesn't owe us any commitment to to the trunks. Like, it's still in development. The whole scripting everything's being slowed down because of the writer's strike, and then what could soon be a Screen Actors Guild strike as well. That's on the horizon. The only strike that they've averted was the Directors Guild. So we're not out of the woods yet. Everything is going to get delayed. Marvel's already pushed back their schedule. Not just because of the related things, but if you're not having trunks is not showing a lack of fidelity to the source material. There's a lot changed in Man of Steel that was took inspiration and went in a different direction from the comics, and you've got 90 years of Superman comics to draw from. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of issues where he doesn't have trunks. There's different designs. There's different people who've gone by the name of Superman. Let's not get hung up on trunks.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about what Gunn wants to or doesn't want to do with that design. I'm not gonna. All that I'm gonna do is point and laugh at it because I have a low bar of expectation for whatever he brings out. But you were mentioning the breakup of the colors. I mean, I think that's when you up the saturation on that image, which is crazy because even back then, like, they showed that image of him against the bank vault, like maybe thrown against it. Like, what could have fucking thrown him? Like, he looks distraught. He does not look like he's unstoppable. Something is stopping Superman. Like, the guy knows how to market. But on the design himself, you see like some lines, not a belt necessarily, but there are some lines that definitely break around the waist that goes down and breaks up some of that color. I think that's why it's one of the reasons why I personally don't think the Supergirl costume works in the Flash. It kind of looks like a leotard a little bit. It seems to just go straight down to just blue. And then they have the upper part, which is red and everything else. So I think that's one of the reasons that looks a little weird. Same with the Flash costume. When he's running in that trailer for the new film, like, it looks like the lightning, right? That goes throughout his body. And I still don't think it looks good, but at least it's not just a red suit. But then when he's standing still, that's why so many of these shots look bizarre, where Ezra's just standing there in this weird suit, and it doesn't have the breakup that the suit from the Zack Snyder's Justice League had, where it had all these details and designs like you'd see in a Jim Lee drawing from the New 52. And instead it's like a straight traditional Flash suit, which in my opinion, I don't think works on the big screen.
I mean, I personally have been trying to avoid like full on, shots of it. And it's, try to work. I want to just like go into it as cold as I can. And I already can't because I've had stuff, I'm one of those people normally, like, I don't care about spoilers. It doesn't like make me want to see things, less, than I do. But with this one coming out, like, by the time this comes out, I will have seen it. And I've been trying to avoid spoilers because in the Arrowverse TV shows, when they started playing around with the multiverse, like, I was a kid in a candy store when they were just like flashing me an image, no pun intended, of Helen Slater's Supergirl or John Wesley Shipp's Flash from the early 90s, when they were taking peeks and dives in there. And so, like, I know that they've been talking about, like, there's a big dive into the multiverse in this one, and I know there's going to be stuff, surprises and nuggets and fan servicey things in there, and I'm trying to go into that cold. But the design of the costume, like, I'm personally like that they're doing an upgrade because his first suit was clunky. It was assembled with, whatever he could cobble together. It looks like Bruce Wayne's giving him some money or giving him a new suit. It looks like it's leaning more into like the New 52 design of like the running lines of the lightning going up his costume and stuff like that Jim Lee, brought to the fore. So I really haven't seen like a good still image of him just like kind of standing there. So I'm kind of going to reserve judgment until I see it in the movie, because when they did it in the the CW like Flash show, like the first shots of Grant Gustin and the costume of that, or the people are seeing while they were filming were criticizing it, and how terrible it looked, and that the show came on, and then all of a sudden everyone was praising the suit because it looked completely different once you're seeing it in in context. And I've seen some of the criticisms of it, and I see one side, but I also see the other side of, well, I mean, again, it looks like you're going for a more traditional suit, and maybe it'll be a different suit by the end of the movie. We'll see. The suits change every movie.
Well, you can let us know next time you're on for sure. That's one thing, Zach, and this isn't a in continuity film anyway, but Zach mentioned that his suit in his universe is exactly that, like a concept suit, and that he had set it up so that in later films he would have his an upgraded suit. And I don't think this is the suit that they were thinking of, because that film was completely different than what we're seeing now with under Walter Hamada and Toby Emmerich when they produced that film. He was going for something better than Flashpoint is how he put it. I don't think we would have gotten the Thomas Wayne, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I don't know. Maybe we would have, but the way he is about Jeff Johns now, I think he would have changed that quite a bit. But that's what that reminded me of, that this would have been, at some point, there would have been some kind of upgrade to the suit. And that does lead it into some Flash news, as Michael Shannon spoke about his role as General Zod in Man of Steel. And he voiced his dissatisfaction with multiverse movies, comparing them to playing with action figures. So this was an interview with Collider where he expressed his preference for in-depth character studies like Man of Steel, stating, quote, "These multiverse movies are like somebody playing with action figures. It's not quite the in-depth character study situation that I honestly felt Man of Steel was," end quote. He acknowledged the sophistication of the Flash, as he put it, but clarified that his character Zod is there primarily to present a challenge rather than being the focus of the story. When I put this up on some DC groups, they were like, yet he took the paycheck. It's like, of course he fucking took the pay. I'd take the fucking paycheck. Like, you're going to pay me to come back as Zod, and you're going to pay me some big bucks to film in a green screen and probably AI my face on a body. Like, yeah, it's an easy paycheck, man. Especially since from what he's saying, it sounds like he's in one scene for the film and not throughout the whole thing. I think this speaks on sort of that side of, some of these movies are going to stand the test of time and some of these aren't. And I think to him, something like Man of Steel or his role as General Zod in that film, he got to chew on a lot more than what it sounds like he got in The Flash.
Yeah. And I'm kind of like, looked at that, read that article, and I've watched some clips of him. He's kind of like very, I want to say, like, very careful with, with his words. And I could see where, like, I didn't think Zod was like a major part of this movie too. So I think he's speaking to, like, how it wasn't as satisfying, because again, he's there as a plot device. He's not there as a character.
Yeah.
But I think it does speak to, like, how well he did that character in Man of Steel, that they brought him back and, like, immediately seen him, in there, like in a trailer. You're like, oh shit. It's that, like, that's how fucked up this new universe is, that, like, that they have, I saw, like, some material, they have like a half power Kryptonian on their side, and then Zod's got his entire army still. I'm glad to see him back. I'm glad that he took the paycheck. I think he's just speaking to, as an artist, he just didn't get to do, as much as he would have liked to have done, like he did in the first one. As far as, like, the multiverse thing being like a kid, sandbox playing, with their action figures, that's a selling point to me, because that just takes me back to, playing with my kids, or playing with my toys in a box, or, smashing them all together. So it's like everyone's got a multiverse thing going on right now. That's the plot device du jour. Looking forward to seeing him back in, one more time, and, maybe we'll see him again, but I see his point of view.
I know he got the green light from Zach. Like, he ran it by him first, and he's like, "Can I get your blessing to do this?" And Zach was like, "Yeah, do what you want. You're you." Don't you think that all of this, because remember, this was again under Hamada and Emmerich. I haven't seen the film, but I bet you this was all brought back. Like, I don't think Zod was brought back, Michael Shannon, because of how great he did in Man of Steel. I don't think that the filmmakers, that regime, appreciated any of that anyway. I think this was all an excuse for them to write an alternate way to stop Zod as a slap in the face to Man of Steel of like, hey, well, remember originally they killed off Kal-El in that first cut of that Flash Hamadaverse before Zaslav came in, but this was all a thing to like, we're going to replace Henry Cavill with Supergirl. She's going to be the Superman of the universe moving forward. Pre-gun again, all of this changed, and she's going to knock out Zod, and they're going to show everyone like, look, he could have knocked it. They're going to do that. You know, this is why they brought back Zod. It's just to show that, look, we can write a better way to stop Zod.
Yeah, another way. I mean, I don't know if maybe Barry's going to get some licks in him. I don't know. I think it's, again, it's anytime you show an alternate universe, it's got to turn out worse, because why would, what's the motivation of them going back to the universe they came from, or trying to get things, set things right? So like, maybe Supergirl dies, maybe Zod kills her, you know, and that the only way to get to, you know, fix it is that, like, that's the, you know, the final straw where like, okay, well, he was wrong in what he was doing, and now he's got to go back and reset things. His mother's got to, you know, die on that day when he was a kid, and get things as close to back to what they were as possible, but still different. Like, you know, any crisis, you know, on anything Earth's related, you know, series, well, it does, you know, like 0 Hour, Countdown, you know, all of it. Like, there's a big crisis and things return close to where they were at, but a little off. And now we explore the new from there.
Well, let me know what happens, because I'm planting that flag. I think she's gonna. This is 2023. You can't have a superpowered woman get killed off. That she's gonna defeat all these Kryptonians on her own. She's gonna knock out Zod, and I think that's my prediction. But yeah, I'll trust your truth when you tell me it. I'll just believe whatever you tell me. And we got one story left on here before we go into Adrian's Patreon comment. And if you want to take this one, because you had brought up how this was, it is a big deal in the comic world.
Yeah, so renowned artist John Romita Sr., known for defining look of Spider-Man and Marvel Comics, has passed away at 93. He started his career in 1949, became Marvel's art director, co-creating iconic characters like Mary Jane Watson and designing Black Widow's modern look. Romita's influence on the industry and his mentorship of aspiring artists is immeasurable. He is survived by his wife and 2 sons. His son, John Jr., announced the news on Twitter, calling him a legend in the art world. And he is a legend in the art world. While, you know, Steve Ditko did create Spider-Man and gave him the initial look, John Romita Sr. is like the guy. You know, everything, like the cartoons were based off of, you know, his look, his version of Spider-Man, you know, for decades. And I never met him personally, but when I was in high school and had big dreams of being a comic book artist, my art teachers went to, it was a art teachers or NIAD, a New York Art Teachers Association. There was a convention that they were down and near New York City. John Romita Jr. was there, brought some of the a variety of students' artwork to show off to other teachers and present. And John Romita Jr. was there, and of course, any teacher who had anyone doing, you know, comic book related work, they were all showing them, you know, their artwork, their students' artwork, and they showed him this piece that I had done, and his comments were, you know, to them were, you know, this kid's got promise. Tell him he's willing to go to school, or he goes to school for 3 or 4 years after high school. I'll have a job waiting for him at Marvel Comics. And then, you know, signed the back of my drawing that I had done, and gave them, or his business card to give to me. And I sent him a thank you letter. Never heard anything back, which I wasn't expecting anything back. And I tried, and I just was never successful in getting into the comic book industry. But that's my John Romita Sr. story. You know, total class act from anyone who's ever met him in the industry, and a giant.
Yeah, that's a hell of a story, man. I mean, how many people can say they've had that experience? That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not someone I ever ran into at a convention either. I think by the time, it was always JR that was at MegaCon from what I remember. And maybe it's due to age or whatever, but yeah, it's not someone that unfortunately I ever met, or honestly, I don't have early Spider-Man work like that. I know some of my coworkers Like Sean, he was just on last week for the Spider-Verse review. I mean, he has a lot of those early issues. Bobby, who's a friend of mine also and a host on the show, I think he's close to collecting, he's got the early issues that he needs to get still, but he's almost got every single issue in the run of ASM. Like, he's a current collector, and he's gone back and filled in some of those early gaps as well, which do include some of his artwork here. So, I mean, the impact on the industry is incredibly massive. I know he was also one of the victims to Stan Lee's paying. Like, the biggest one was Kirby. Like, he really was hurting, especially, but
Kirby and Ditko.
Yeah. And from when I was reading I have the book somewhere here, but the Rise and Fall of Stan Lee, like, John Romita Sr. is mentioned in there as well. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those, not as effective though, but it's just goes to show you those early days, Wild West of comics, right? And thankfully he was able to imprint his designs, his characters, all of that into the world of comics during that time, because these characters are going to continue to grow and be adapted in future films, books, movies, and go on beyond us. And I think that any Spider-Man fan especially is mourning this week. So great amount of work though left us with an incredible universe that even things that I love, like Batman, probably wouldn't be the same without the world of Spider-Man. So huge thanks to John Romita Sr.
Yeah, he's a legend.
Let's go ahead and end things before we head into the Brokehead block with Adrian's Patreon comment this week, referencing last week's traditional episode that released on Monday, saying, quote, "I can't believe that Netflix exec told Zach that his film has to be under 2 hours." He's referencing Rebel Moon coming out December. "I remember when the Netflix Twitter account was promoting Army of the Dead. One of your tweets said that his film was the Snyder Cut. I hope parts 1 and 2 are 2.5 hours long each, like Army of the Dead was. The Irishman was 3 hours long and it was highly praised. Just because a film is short, like an hour and a half to 2 hours, it doesn't make it good. It also doesn't guarantee box office numbers. It's sad that society nowadays has a really short attention span, with films being less than 2 hours, songs that are 2 minutes long," end quote. I think it is that mentality of, obviously, box office, right? You want to sell as many tickets as possible, so get as many screenings as possible in there. We saw it with BVS, cut down by 30 minutes. And Netflix, I don't know if you had overheard, but they were saying that their streaming numbers showed that people don't continue watching as far as retaining the attention span for films that are longer than 2 hours. But as Basio was saying last week, if the film is good, people are going to stick around. And he was like, the reason why Netflix has those numbers is because most of the shit they release that's over 2 hours long is not very good.
I get that, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate once again in this episode. Why not? Why stop now? I mean, it's like Pete Davidson before he left SNL. Like, he had his little SNL digital short talking about like a short ass movie, and Netflix in response to that made a whole new category of like short ass movies. Movies that are like like an hour, like an hour and a half to like less than 2 hours. It's a general thing that the length of movies has gone up in the last in releases has gone up in the last like 10, 15 years. Usually the standard, used to be, an hour and a half to 2 hours. A long movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes in the theaters. Titanic was one of those things where it was, when that came out, it was a rare movie that was 3 hours in theaters. Then that's becoming more common. You had the Lord of the Rings series that like, the theatrical cuts were like 3.5 hours, and like the home editions were like 4.5 hours. So like the length of movies has been getting longer. And when Netflix made that category after that SNL short, like they showed that like, okay, they're showing, they're obviously getting more, more viewers, more churn basically with that, and that's a metric. You don't want to. I hate when people govern by metrics, but like if you're a big business, generally what's going to work and what doesn't with those numbers. And then I'll give the example of my wife, a few of my friends. They are much more down for a 10-hour long season of a show, even if it all drops in the same day, because it's broken up into like 1 hour chunks, because that's what their attention span's for, and that is good for generally. Like they over a 2 hour, 2.5 hour movie, they drift in and out, and even I drift in and out. Sometimes if I'm at a theater, I'm focused on there, but if I'm at home, I'm usually playing on my phone, or it's very rare where, these days where like there's something that holds my attention so much that like I'm not doing something else at the same time. But generally, like I know that people with ADD, ADHD, they need, it's like it's a mental necessity that has to be under 2 hours or 2 hours less, because like at that 2 hour mark, or before they get to that 2 hour mark, their brain just is not engaged in it anymore, and it has nothing to do with the length of media getting shorter. It's just what they can process, and they need before they need a break for something else to jolt them.
It sounds like Zach and Deborah got their way with Rebel Moon, because the way they were speaking about it, they were like, oh, like silly Netflix type of thing, right? Where they were like, yeah, but we got over that, or they didn't compromise, but they came to an agreement. And so, which is good. So Adrian, good news. It's probably going to be its full length. And then, as Zach has said, he's releasing an R-rated version, and then a version that everyone can watch for Rebel Moon. So like Star Wars, PG-13 or PG, whatever it may be. And then, the extended cut or the R-rated version of Rebel Moon Part 1. So that's exciting news. I still think it is silly, because all of us, including myself, were like, yeah, they're going to give him the freedom to do what he wants over at Netflix, especially after Army of the Dead. They let him do his thing with that, and that did great for Netflix and amazing numbers. So it's like, if I were Netflix, it's like, Zach, just here's your budget, do what you want. But it seemed like it was an issue.
And hope it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like even though they still had a bit of a struggle, amazingly, they still had to fight a little bit for that. It sounds like he's getting what he wants in December. So thanks again, Adrian, for your comment on Patreon and for your support along with the rest of the Brocat Core members. Let's jump into the final portion of today's show, which is the Brocat Block, what Matt and I have been up to since you last heard us. So Matt, what have you been watching, playing, reading? What's been making you broke?
Cruises. My wife and I finally went on our honeymoon cruise last month, and it was the disconnection from the world that both of us needed. It was great. The only country I've been to outside of the United States is Canada, and it's been a long time since I've been up there, since I like lived up in New York. So we got to go to Haiti, Jamaica, and Grand Cayman. And I don't want to say, like, Haiti was pretty much just like the private peninsula for Royal Caribbean. Did not like so much going to the what they called the town center, which was just basically where like locals could sell like local crafts and art and stuff like that made by local art artisans. And it was very much a kind of a harassing situation over there. It was just outside of where, like right at the edge of, like, they had a very specific area that they could not go beyond. And once you cross over to that, they kept trying to wave you over. People were kind of like stepping on each other's toes, like almost coming to the point of touching you to like pull you over to their stall. And I'm like, no. And it just kind of made us a little, so we just basically pretty much stayed at the beach there. Then Jamaica, we used that as a pool day on the ship. We just stayed on the ship while, figure most people were going to be down on the island, down on the island or in the market center. So we went to the pool, spent the day at the pool that day. And we were like, it was, for the most part, we had the pool to ourselves and maybe like 3 other people for most of the day. And then Grand Cayman, we walked around on a bit. Like Grand Cayman, the water is so crystal clear blue. Like I couldn't fucking believe it. It was like, we definitely have to go back there and we want to spend more time there. The beer that they had there was some of the best tasting beer that I've ever had. Definitely got my use out of the unlimited drink beverage package that we got for that ship, or to the point where, like, by the last day, it's like it was getting boring drinking. But we had a great time. It was rough, coming back to the real world, but we're already looking at doing a cruise next year. But other than that, we've seen Across Spider-Verse twice now.
Oh, there you go.
That came out. And that movie, have you seen it yet?
Yeah. There's a review. Actually, by the time this releases, an extra bonus episode has released with our full discussion and review with my old coworker Sean.
God, it is so unbelievably good. I want to we would go broke trying to if we took frames of that movie, we'd go, and to hang on our walls, we would go broke with how many frames we would want to hang on our walls.
Gorgeous film.
It was just gorgeous from beginning to end. I loved how it transitioned, the colors, like Gwen Stacy's like Spider-Woman universe to the Spidey Central with every character being a completely different style. Like that one sequence took something like 4.5 years for them to animate.
Yeah,
when they were in the Spider Society. And even though it's weird, they advertised or they talked about like a year or two ago at least that Across Spider-Verse was being split into 2 movies. And it was still surprising. Like a number of people were like surprised that it ended, on a cliffhanger. Like, I didn't know there was another one. I'm like, well, maybe they kind of kept that a little closer to their chest than I thought was, but I thought they'd made it pretty clear like a year ago, that maybe even 2 years ago, that this was now it's been delayed a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
And that they were still working on the production. They finished production like 13 days before the movie released.
Yeah, they definitely but you got to remember, like, this is what I told Nick. You and I, we're in the circle of knowing all this stuff. So we knew it was part 1. General audience, they don't even, they have no idea. Like, and that's something that I think Nick or Sean mentioned, that they could have at least put part 1, like a bigger part of that somewhere in the posters or in the commercials or even at the beginning of the film, like a big Across the Spider-Verse part 1. That way people know ahead of time, like, oh, okay, this is going to be like Dune, where it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think originally when they made it clear that it was being split into 2 movies, they were calling them Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 and then Part 2. And then it wasn't until recently where they renamed the third one to Beyond the Spider-Verse, so that they don't have any numbering going on in the series. But I'm stoked for the next one. I love the nod to, Miles Morales exists because of Donald Glover. To get him in that movie was amazing. And so it was, that made me broke a couple of times, and it's going to make me broke when the next one, I'll get even more broke when the next one comes out. But other than that, the next thing on the schedule that's going to make us broke is, my wife's brother and his wife are coming from, they've been living in China. They teach there. They've been there for over a decade, but they haven't been back to the States in 5-6 years. So he is coming in 2 weeks, and for his birthday, and then her birthday is 10 days after that. So we're all going. He hasn't been to Disney stateside since he was a kid. So
there you go.
We got annual passes again. We went almost a year without them, and now we're back.
I remember that. I remember.
It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it also feels like it's been forever too. We were actually excited about going to. We went to Epcot on this past Sunday, and that was. We were still very excited. We were happy to go. It wasn't as busy as we were expecting, but it was as hot as we were expecting. And like, what have we gotten ourselves into? But it just made more sense to get the annual passes again versus just getting it for while he's here. Like the Florida resident deal they had for like a 4-day pass was, like $20 more than just the down payment on the new annual pass. So, as long as we go, roughly once a month, that'll have been worth it.
Yeah. Then that's when it'll pay for itself.
Yeah.
That's great, man. And I'm glad you like Spider-Verse and that you're getting a lot done, man. That's awesome. I sort of lived through you a little bit. Kelly and I used to go to Disney a lot before we had Leo, and now with us.
Well, once they're both, and you got time to start saving up for when they can remember it.
Yeah, very true. And that's one thing that I did. I mentioned that before, but like before or after Sophia was born, my brother and I took Leo to Universal Studios to have like his own day just with him, so that he could. Because the baby's going to have a lot of our time and attention. She just simply needs us way more. and he's a lot more independent. But we're being careful with trying to give him his time as well. Not feel like he is in the way or whatever. Whatever he may feel from having a baby around. So, and that's been tough because it's the first thing for us too. But that's something
how do you like Universal?
He loved it. Like he just stayed in the Jurassic Park area. Like that's all he wanted to do. Like we walked past Harry Potter and Spider-Man and all that, but like as soon as we got to Jurassic Park, he's like, oh, like he freaked out because it was a surprise to him. We made it a surprise. So he wanted to go on everything in Jurassic Park. He went on that water raft ride. That didn't scare him at all. Yeah, but the glider one scared him. Like he was afraid of the heights. Like after he was done, he's like, I don't want to go on that one again, Dad. And I'm like, okay.
Pteranodon flyers.
Yeah, which is funny because that one's made for kids, and the other one's not necessarily. But he loves the fucking T-Rex. So when the thing's coming out at the end, he's like, "Oh, cool!" He's pointing at it. Like in the story, it's gonna eat us, but he doesn't care. Like, yeah, eat me, whatever.
I remember the first time going on that one. That was a bunch of fun. I've been on Pteranodon flyers once. Yeah, it was made for kids, and you could only as an adult, you could only go on there if you have a kid in the front there that's under a certain height or whatever. So like it's a legit thing where people in Universal groups will hey, my kid and I are gonna be here, so if you want to buy me a beer, you can take my kid on this ride so you can go on the ride. I didn't do that. Orlando Informer had they have occasional separately ticketed event nights like a couple times a year. And on one of them, I went with some friends that that I'd met through this single riders group I used to run. A friend of theirs had to cancel, so so they gave me their ticket, and they had managed to get. There was a separate sign up. They had so many spots they could give out for adults to go on by themselves on Pteranodon flyers at night. And I identify with Leo's fear because that thing swung a lot more side to side than I expected it to from the ground.
Yes, it did.
It doesn't look like it that much. When I went on there, I'm like, oh.
I felt like it was gonna I don't know, break and fall. Like just how much it was swinging.
Yeah.
I'm like, this metal scraping against metal is eventually gonna do something. Yeah, it's a heavy one, man. I could see why Leo was scared. I just thought it was funny, though. I thought he thought it was cool, but no, even he was like, yeah, that's a little much, Dad. And I felt powerless, too, because I'm so, the seats are so separated. There were times when the thing was swinging back and forth pretty violently that I wanted to reach over and hang on to his shoulders, but I couldn't. I was like, oh my God, if he were to just fall out now, I'd be completely powerless. I couldn't do a thing. So from a parental standpoint, too, very scary.
I'm glad he had fun.
Yeah. The thing I did get to watch is Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. So I've gone to theater almost 3 weeks in a row, I think. And I'm a Beast Wars guy. I grew up on Beast Wars. That was my Transformers. I didn't grow up on that was before my time, the one that everyone else grew up on with Transformers. So I saw Beast Wars. I loved it. And I hadn't seen a Transformers film since I think 2 or 3, as far as the Michael Bay ones. So I was like, oh, they're putting the fucking Beast Wars in this. Now it's a movie for, my audience. So I'm going to go check it out. Of course, I went to see it and I saw my Beast Wars. They didn't get as much screen time as I would have liked. It mainly focused on Optimus Primal because he's the leader. You have the two Optimuses talking to each other, and they didn't have enough time, I guess, to put in some more of the character interactions with Cheetor or Rhinox, or even they didn't even have the Predacons in there. But it was enough to where, my nostalgia itch was scratched with that. I hope we do get to see more of them in the future. I would have loved to have seen a hint of and here's this purple T-Rex over here. What's that mean? Something like that to set up the Predacons, which unfortunately, we didn't get, but it was still cool enough for me to watch. And I will say that if you didn't grow up on Beast Wars or watch it or enjoy it, that, I feel like I wanted to sit with older Transformers fans just to see what their reaction would have been of why are these guys in here? Why are we focusing on a different,
into Beast Wars when that came out. I'm a Generation 1 guy. That's what I grew up with. And I tried Beast Wars a couple of times. I had the hard time, it really just threw me where in the timeline does this take place? Is this not Earth? Is this Earth? And I've read about that's happened later, but like it definitely there's definitely a divide in Transformers fans between Generation 1 and Beast Wars, and that's fine. I'm hoping to see this movie too. I don't know when I'm going to be able to see it. It might just be a streaming thing for me just because of timing with everything going on, and my brother-in-law coming in town soon, so I might not have the opportunity to really go see it until it's on streaming.
Which should be like next week with the way things go.
Basically, the way things are going, right? I like the reboot of the series with Bumblebee. Yeah, I know this is a sequel to Bumblebee, so right. I like that course correction. The last Michael Bay movie, it was a slog. Like I just needed the noise to stop.
What was that one called? The Knights of the Cybertron?
The last night.
Okay, yeah, that's on Paramount Plus. I got to watch that. It's on my list, but I never saw it. But I saw that there's like some big ass T-Rex in it, metal, and Leo saw that and he's like, "Oh, cool." I'm like, "All right, I guess we're gonna watch that."
I think that's the 5th one. I think there were 5 Michael Bay ones.
Yeah, and this, as you mentioned, it does take place in the Bumblebee universe, and there. What's funny about Beast Wars, and I don't know if this answers your question about the timeline, but I believe there is an episode where the Predacons are trying to kill Optimus from the original Optimus because he's asleep on Earth, and the Maximals stop them from killing Optimus. So I don't know how many years in the past that is, but there's a little nod to Optimus still being on Earth.
I think what I read was that like Primal and the Maximals are from the future, and there was a time warpy thing or whatever, and they got sent back to the ancient past of Earth. Yeah. So he's like a Prime descendant, but not like he didn't come before Prime. It just, my brain couldn't process it because like I would think that the animals would come before the vehicles, right? And so it was like it was weird. But yeah, they basically were the Overwatch protecting the Autobots until like the Autobots were reawakened.
Yeah, and if the Predacons had been able to kill Optimus, that would have erased the Maximals, or at least, Primal. So, yeah, that was kind of one of those things. And there was even an episode where they teach humans, like Neanderthals, how to use tools. I was like, oh shit, there you go. The next step of evolution was because of the fucking Predacons. Yeah, there's some fun stuff in there, but it's on Tubi, I want to say. One of those free ones. You can watch Beast Wars on there for free, in case anyone ever wants to go back and revisit, which I'm apprehensive on because I know some of the kids shows, not all of them are like Batman animated series where I can love as an adult too. I went back and tried to watch Spider-Man and X-Men, the animated series, and I was like, oh man, it was better left remembered than revisited.
I did that when Generation 1 came out on DVD like 20 years ago, and I definitely should have just left it as something I remembered.
Oh, damn. Yeah, I'm probably going to run into the same with Beast Wars then.
Yeah, it's just like as an adult, like you basically you're much more wiser to like every marketing poll they put in those to sell the toys. There's a plot hole that is something that doesn't make sense literally every 5th minute. And it's just, it's but don't besmirch Transformers the animated movie.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to, like, I hear that was for a generation of children, like their first major death.
That's the first time I ever cried in a movie.
There you go.
Literally the first time I ever cried in a movie. Like when my parents dropped me off at the movie theater to watch that, and they picked me up, and I was sitting on the curb crying because Optimus Prime died. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so it doesn't even end like on a good, is it like a good death at least? Like, oh, well, he'll be back like Spock or anything like that?
It's hard to watch it when like, that wasn't like at the end of the movie. It was like in the first 20 minutes of the movie, Prime dies. Because in the rest of the movie is like the remaining Autobots like running, from like being, hunted down by the Decepticons, and then just the Unicron, an even bigger threat. It sucked because like in the throughout the cartoon series, Optimus, like Megatron at no point had Optimus Prime's number. Like Prime would always beat the shit out of Megatron. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was one time like he cheated by like trying to like, the other Decepticons, like transferred their unique powers to Megatron in like this one-on-one fight, and like whoever, if Prime lost, then the Autobots had to leave the Earth, And so Megatron cheated. But even with all that, Prime still almost kicked his ass. And so the way he dies is like it's Prime doing the Prime thing, like he basically got sucker punched by Megatron. But then Prime almost took him out too, and it was very like an Autobot or a Transformers version of like the Superman Doomsday fight.
Okay.
How it all ended. Like Megatron was on death's door as well. It was rough because like the way he died after that, it's like you knew he died because he went from like all the color just turned gray.
Jesus.
It's just
to show you that he's really dead.
And then his head just like lifelessly like went from like looking straight up to like all of a sudden just falls limp like to one side. And it's just like it's still like a rough death to watch. It was every kid of my generation's like Bambi moment.
Yeah, there you go.
But definitely you should check it out. Like I've watched it a couple times as an adult, and yeah, there are definitely some cheesy things, but animation's good. I think it's a large part of it like still holds up, and like I do like for the most part the modern movies because of like again the Michael Shannon remark of smashing action figures together. Like that's what those movies do. Like if I had like $200 million to play with Transformers, that's probably what would be up on the screen.
That's awesome. Well, I have one more Transformers question to ask you after the end jingle, but I first want to thank you for being on and for always providing an alternate perspective to a lot of these news stories, especially as there's other things coming out that someone is excited for here on the set of hosts. I think you and Nick, maybe Nick. I know Nick is looking forward to some of these DC projects, but yeah, it sounds like you'll at least my link to that world.
Cool. Happy to help.
But thank you again, and please let them know where they can find you if they want to continue the conversation.
You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Madner or on Instagram at madner.com.
Perfect. And there will be links to everywhere you can find him on the description of today's show. And this week, if you want to check out our new shirt designs that we have put up on our TeePublic, head on over to thereasonsimbroke.com, click on merch, and click on any of the images. They'll send you straight to the TeePublic shop. There's a Sonic the Hedgehog artist that put up some designs for Silver the Hedgehog, for example, even Sonic, like a modern and a classic Sonic. And TeePublic lets us host other designs on TeePublic as a partner. So you can check out some of those Sonic designs, again, on our TeePublic. And both the artists and the shop get a little cut of those sales. So thank you once again for joining us this week. I've been Daniel, joined by Matt, and Brocat Core. All will be well. So, Matt, my favorite Transformer, if it counts as a Transformer, was Silverbolt from the Maximals. So I do got to ask, which one is yours? And as someone who didn't watch Generation 1, is the cassette player Transformer as silly in concept in the show itself?
So Optimus Prime is my favorite.
All right.
But Soundwave is the Decepticon you're thinking of. Not so, like he had a cool voice, but like as a fighter himself, he kind of like stayed more in the background. It was like the cassettes that popped out. Like it was weird seeing him like shrink down to like an actual. They never really dealt with like how like he would transform into a robot. Like the humanoid size, or not like human size, but like he'd be as tall as Megatron. They all kind of like were very similar in scale once they transformed from whatever form they had, but like they never explain like how Megatron's able to like collapse down into like a handheld gun, or how Soundwave like is able to transform down into a little like a cassette player. But the cassettes that would eject from them, those were the ones that were always like fucking trouble. Like Laserbeak was always shit. Like a Decepticon, a ring camera. Like he was always spying on shit. Like you could always count on like Laserbeak being a problem. I can't remember the Frenzy and I can't remember the other one, but they had like a weaker version of him in the first Transformers movie, but it was he'd always like cause like like his arms would turn into like pile drivers and he would like cause like seismic movements. Like they used him in like the original like first few episodes to like cause like seismic activity to increase the output of like hydroelectric dams so they could make more energon cubes. I'm remembering way too much of that show for something that I haven't watched, and obviously it made a mark.
Yep.
But it was like the cassettes that would jump out or that would come out of him, like that made him kind of a threat, because it was never just Soundwave that anyone was facing. It was him and at least like 3 or 4 other like mini Decepticons that were coming out of him. So he had a cool voice, but he himself wasn't intimidating. It was his little minions.
Just a cool voice and a cool design.
Cool voice, cool design. Before like you had the multi-changers, or they should have merchandised it more, because every cassette was like a different robot, and he had at least like 4 or 5 that and then like they keep coming up with more. Well, I was more concerned with, okay, so not only does he transform down into like a mini cassette or be like a cassette player, but also like whatever Decepticons like the cassettes also somehow like shrink down with him. And then they had the Autobot version, Blaster, who his voice was not as cool. He sounded like a morning DJ.
Was he a boombox?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Younger Burkettes are like, what the fuck is a boombox and a cassette? What the hell are these guys talking about?